Stories for Our Daughters explores the tales of everyday women from the South Asian subcontinent who've been strong, unorthodox, and extraordinary in their own unique way. Be it for the bars they've raised, the battles they've survived, the ceilings they've shattered, or the courage they've inspired. These are women we encounter in our daily lives who, like so many of us, straddled multiple geographies, distinct systems, and diverse cultures. And their compelling journeys are presented in their very own words. I'm Madhuri Baldwa Bhat, and this is Stories for Our Daughters. My guest today, Leena Sujan, is the founder and CEO of Mumba Technologies, a high-tech and engineering staffing company headquartered in Silicon Valley, California. Prior to Mumba, Leena had half a dozen successful careers, ranging from radio jockey and flight attendant to consulting with Deloitte and Oracle. When Leena's twin girls were 3 years old, her husband abruptly abandoned them and absconded with their entire life savings and investments, as well as the capital of his venture partners. He had also been abusive towards Leena in their 11 years of marriage. Leena filed for divorce, became an entrepreneur, and began to actively support victims of domestic abuse. Leena also found love again. A blended family, Leena lives with her husband Shirish Kumar, their son Ishan, and twin daughters Priyanka and Rupali in Saratoga, California. Leena Sujan, welcome to the first season of Stories for Our Daughters.
Thank you, Madhuri, for having me here today.
Leena, let me dive into the first question right away. How old were you when your first husband abandoned you? And how did you realize that he had absconded, and that too with all of your life savings and the investments of his venture partners?
So, Madhuri, this was something that was building up for a few years. He left when I was 33, but even before I turned 30, he had actually stopped working. He had moved all of the money from our joint accounts into his personal account. And finally, he had moved it out of the country with no visibility on my part, saying that he didn't want to keep any money in the country because he was taking investments for some business that he was starting. He was always starting one business or another. He'd start a venture, it wouldn't work. Then he would con some other people into partnering with him, and they would give him investments to make, and he would pretend to be working on those. And then, but finally, when the girls were 3 years old, and one of his latest ventures had not been doing well, he had taken money and investment from some people, and they were asking for that money back. So he was trying to pressure me into selling the house and moving to India with him. Since we had moved all our money to India already, I told him we can move to India, but I'm not willing to sell the house. At that point, he got really aggressive. He got really violent, started threatening me, started threatening the girls. And one fine day, things really escalated and he got really physical. And because at that point I'd had enough, and I called the cops in, and things really escalated. That was really the last time that he was in the house. The girls were 3, I was 33. And when he left, I slowly started to see what he had been doing, because I was still in the house. The house was in my name since I had been the one who had been paying for the house. He didn't want to be on the mortgage, so he didn't get to be on the title. So I was still in the same place, same address. And suddenly I started getting letters from these attorneys on behalf of his investors. And slowly I realized he had been planning this all along. He had actually gone into our financial records, taken all of our tax records for the last few years. He had actually taken the girls' immunization records in preparation for taking the girls with him. And that's actually what happened on the last day. He put the girls in the car and just took off. I had to get the cops involved. My brother and I were driving around looking for the girls. We went to his parents' house. So it was it wasn't like one magical day he just woke up and he decided that he was going to leave and leave with everything that we owned, but he really planned it well.
Oh my God, that's gut-wrenching, Leena. So he abandoned you and your daughters. He disappeared from the picture. Um, Take us through the process of getting a divorce in this situation, Leena. How do you divorce a person who's not around? And for that matter, how do you go through the process of finding and getting a divorce attorney and wondering if this person will be good enough to represent you?
So, we don't realize, Madhuri, that when we are in a marriage and we are not allowed to do the research on looking for um, divorce lawyers because we're too afraid to even mention it at home, um, we really don't know where to go for this kind of thing. What happened to me happened on a 4th of July weekend. That was the weekend everything just blew up. He got violent, the police got involved, and he actually ran away with my girls for a few hours till I managed to track them down to his parents' house. So all of this really made me afraid that he was going to do that again and he was going to run away with my girls. And because it was the 4th of July weekend, I wasn't sure if any attorneys were going to be available. It wasn't like I could go to Yellow Pages and start looking for them. So I actually decided to go to the courthouse and ask around. I went to the courthouse and literally walked up to the window and I asked someone, I need to get a divorce. I don't have an attorney. How do I go about it? And before anything else, I need to get a restrictive order so he cannot run away with my girls. It was as simple as that. I walked up to the window, said that, and I started crying as I was saying that. And some random attorney that was standing around, he came up to me and said, I can help you. And I just went with him and signed up the papers and served him with a restrictive order.
So he hasn't left you at this stage. You have just started the proceedings at the stage.
Right. So we were still officially married. Um, he started beating me up one day, and I ran out to my neighbors, called the cops. He runs away with the girls. He takes the girls to the airport because he wants to keep his car. His car was more important to him than anything else. So he hides his car at the airport parking, takes a cab, goes to his parents' house. Of course, by that time, I've been frantically looking around for the girls. I go to his parents' house with the cops. The cops can't do anything because he's technically the father. But still, I take the girls and bring them home with me. I tell him not to come into the house. And of course, he starts threatening me. And his threats were not personal to me, which they had always been. But this time, he's threatening the girls. He was, you're keeping all the house and you want to keep the house for the girls. I'm going to kill the girls. Then what are you going to do about it? So at that point, I realized that there was no going back. There was no way I was going to live with this man. So I had to start the proceeding. I literally found a random lawyer and told him my story and signed up with him. Fortunately for me, it was a good lawyer. It did cost me a bit of money, which I had to borrow at that point because I didn't have any money in the bank, and start the proceeding. And in California, I don't know about other states, but in California, there is actually a process where you can get a divorce without the other person being involved. Mm-hmm. So you have to actually get a PI involved. The PI has to look for the person based on the social security record. You have to put in an ad in the newspaper and let the ad run for 30 days showing your intent to divorce. So the person has 30 days to respond to that ad. You have to send your intent to divorce to his last known address, which at that point was his parents' address. And you have to bring all those records back saying you have made all this effort. The PI has to do an affidavit saying he's tried for 30 days and he cannot find the person that we are looking for. And then we have to file all these papers with the court saying, I would like to get a divorce based on the fact that he has abandoned us. And based on that, I also wanted to get full legal and physical custody of the children. And the court at that point put alimony and child support and all of that on the back burner, saying that's all going to be decided when he finally shows back up. But in the meanwhile, it is a long process, and California courts already are backed up. So it literally took me a year to go through the process. And every time I thought we were making progress, they would find some other piece of information that was missing or some other thing that I needed to do. And while I was doing that, my file went from the top to the bottom again till it came back up. So it did take me a whole year to go through the process, but there is a way to do that under California law where you don't need the other person to be present. But they're given every opportunity to come up and give their side of the story or participate in the process. But if they choose not to, then it's not like you're stuck with them just because they choose to hide.
Leena, when I spoke with your brother and friends, they mentioned that your husband, who to the world outside was very well educated, a doting husband and a charmer, had been all kinds of abusive to you in your 11 years of marriage. If you don't mind, can you share some instances when and how did the abuse start? And how did you cope with his starkly different personas? What was going through your mind at that stage?
You know, it's, I got married to him when I was 23 years old. Okay. I left my career, my family in India, and moved here with him. So I did not have any friends. I did not have any family here. And he was this really good looking, very nice guy who was highly educated. He had a bachelor's degree from one of the top colleges in India. He had a master's degree from one of the top schools here. So on paper, he was a really good guy. And we were a really good looking couple together. So, you know, the first year of marriage was kind of, it just went by, getting to know each other. In the meanwhile, his parents moved here from India, moved in with us. His parents and they had had their own issues from the very beginning. And I kind of became the punching bag on all sides, where I would be the person he would take his frustrations on, but I would be also the person sitting up with his mother and consoling her at night when he had been mean to her. He always had anger issues. So over the years, if you actually look at the physical abuse, he's only ever touched me or hit me 3 times. Of course, if any of my friends or my kids or anybody said that to me, I would say 1 time is too many. And when I now say over the 11 years of marriage, he only ever, you have to realize that all the other times he was extremely sweet. To the outside world, we still ate out of the same plate, you know, years later. The abuse was very subtle. He made me believe that without him, I had no future. I had no personality. You know, I was the way I was because of being with him. He slowly and systematically made me believe that I was dependent on him and I could not survive on my own. Even though if you look at over the years, I was more successful in my career. I was making more money than him in a career where he had actually helped me get into that career. In a career where I came with a bachelor's degree and no technology degree and background at all. But I worked hard, and he actually was upset that I was doing better than him. And over the years, he made me believe that he was better at investments. So he slowly took money out of our accounts and moved it to his personal account. Whenever I objected to anything or whenever I voiced my opinion, he got mad, he got loud, so there was that emotional and financial abuse all along in our marriage. But the actual physical abuse happened a few times. First time a year after we got married, and that's where your question comes in. Actually, I wouldn't have thought about a divorce, but everybody around me, my parents were visiting from India, they told me to leave him. His uncle and aunt who used to live here in the valley, who saw it firsthand, they actually told me that I shouldn't be with him. Years later, when it happened, when I was 5 months pregnant, I did not tell anybody about it because it was too late. In my mind, I had already committed to the marriage, and now I was having twins with him. And then the final time is when it happened on the last day that we were together and under the same roof. Over when it happened when I was pregnant to the time when it happened when the girls were 3 years old, there were several times when I thought about it. In fact, when the girls were 2 months old, I actually left him and moved to India. And while I was gone, he actually tried to sell my house from under me, which he was not even a part of, which he hadn't paid a penny into. So slowly he became worse, but his persona in front of people stayed the same. If I ever shared this with anybody, if I ever talked about it, he got really mad, and I was so afraid of him that I never mentioned it to people outside of our home. His parents knew, and his parents kept trying to tell me to compromise. His parents kept trying to tell him to be better. In fact, they took us to a holy guy, a sadhu, that a Babaji that had come to visit them, and they wanted the Babaji to tell me how important it was for the girl and to adjust and compromise. And when the Babaji heard our whole story, when the Babaji heard him say, she's got a house for her children. If I stay in that house, what's the problem? She cooks food for her children. If I also eat, what's the problem? She loves working anyway. She's very career minded. He made it sound like it was a bad thing, like I was working, I was leaving my little children at home and working out of choice. It was because he wasn't working and there was no other choice. But at the end of it, the Babaji said, I never tell any girls to leave their husbands, but you should leave him. So that made him really mad. We came back from the Babaji that his parents had taken me to, and he got really mad at me for saying all these things. But I hadn't said anything. He was the one doing all the talking. So over the years, I thought about leaving many times, but then he would always convince me. He would say sorry. He would say all the nice things, all the right things. And somehow my being strong and my being financially independent worked against me, because I would get busy with work. I wouldn't think about it. And every instant became a specific instance, which was all my fault because he was stressed out and he wasn't working, and I should be nicer and I should understand more on where he was coming from. So at the end of the day, he made me believe that I was the one who was wrong and I shouldn't think about divorcing him because I didn't have a life after him.
Leena, you're going through so much abuse of different kinds, and you decided to still have kids with him. You went through IVF, in fact, to have your girls. Can you tell us about that?
So I think, like most other Indian girls, I was raised to believe that there is a path your life follows. You grow up, you graduate, you get married, you have children. And that had always been something that I had known in my mind. But even besides that, I loved children. I always wanted to have children of my own, and I've always loved little babies. So I always knew I was going to have children. When I got married, moved here, we were too unsettled, and then we both started doing consulting. We were constantly in different states, even. For years, if you see, our marriage actually survived because we were both not living together. If you see, from 2.5 years after our marriage, we both started consulting. The first 2 years just went by because his parents moved here. We got them situated. We moved to new careers and new lives, moved to Chicago, we moved to St. Louis, but we were both doing consulting. So we were both traveling in different directions. We would leave on Sunday afternoon, go to our client site, work Monday through Thursday night or Friday afternoon. We would come home on Friday. We would have a bare essential apartment because we knew that wasn't where we were living. So we were typical consultants. We were gone all week. We came back on the weekend. And that's why our marriage survived for so long, because we came back on the weekend, we did our laundry. It was like we were dating. There was no groceries at home. We would just eat out, go watch movies. and then we'd be gone again. So for the longest time, our marriage survived like this. It's only when 5 years into our marriage, we came back to California, and we started talking about children, that I realized he did not want children. He said he didn't want children. I definitely wanted children. And I definitely wanted to have a house that I could have my children in. I did not want to do it while traveling and consulting. I was very particular about what I wanted at that time. Even though I didn't have the support system around me, I was married to a husband who at that point, 5 years into our marriage, said, I don't want children. And I don't want children because I don't want any financial responsibility. I don't want to buy a house because I don't want to have a financial responsibility. By that time, I think it was more jealousy because I was doing better than him. And he wanted me to put my money somewhere where he could control it. So we decided to have, I will buy a house. I will have children. He actually made me write on a blank piece of paper that if I choose to have children, I am going to be financially responsible for the children and he will have no responsibility. But by that time, I was so set in my mind that I wanted children. And I felt like the life was going by and I was soon going to be 30 and will I be able to have children? So you have to also understand, I wasn't allowed to talk to anybody about it. He would really get mad. At one point, he had even stopped me from talking to my parents for a period of time because he didn't want anybody advising me on how my life was or the, how wrong it was. So I wanted children. I was in a marriage. I was financially capable of having children. If he wanted to participate in the process, I had to buy him a BMW. I had to buy the house. I had to pay for the IVF. And because I was working hard and making money, I chose to do all that because I really wanted children. And if I was to go back and say, would I have done it the same way? I probably would, even though I know that I should have stepped out and had the same children with someone else, but I love my children so much that I want the same children. I don't want some other children. So that's why I think I always knew I wanted children and I was willing to do whatever it took. And actually that had me stay in the marriage longer than I would have.
Leena, his behavior towards you was so terrible. And you said that you stayed in the marriage longer because you had the girls. I wonder if he hadn't abandoned you so cruelly, Leena, would you have really left him? And the reason I ask this is because as women, we do have very high levels of tolerance and genuinely believe, maybe because of the movies we've seen and the Sati Savitri stories we've heard when we were growing up, that the onus is on us to make the marriage work. Can you comment on that?
So if you ask me, would I have left him the first time he hit me? I would say no. My parents were here at the time, and his uncle and aunt who live in the valley were actually around when he hit me the first time, and they all asked me to leave him, but there was no way I was going to leave him. In fact, I made an excuse for him that he was stressed out because his parents were fighting with him. And so over the years after that, he didn't hit me. There was other kinds of abuse. There was verbal and emotional and financial abuse, but I wouldn't have left him because I was always the first one making an excuse for why he was the way he was. He was insecure about his job. He was having trouble with his boss. He was looking for a new venture. So I was always the one making excuses on why he was so stressed out and why he was the way he was. And I knew that whatever factor it was that I had come up as an excuse, when that went away. So when he found his new job, when his venture was successful, he was going to be back to being the sweet man, which he never was. But in my mind, he was, because that's what I had married. But once the girls were born and he was abusive, I had started thinking about leaving, or I had started thinking about the choices that I had, because I didn't want my girls growing up in an abusive family. I didn't want my girls seeing that abuse. And it wasn't like a conscious thought that I said, I don't want to have this, but I just didn't want to live that way anymore. But but it still was that back and forth. I was still making excuses that he was being abusive because he was tired and not sleeping because the girls were so little and crying all the time, and that's what was stressing him out. I was still making excuses, but I had started thinking about what else I wanted to do. I actually went to the Gurdwara one time and I just sat there and I cried and I just left it on God to decide for me, because I didn't know what the right thing was. Should I leave him because I had little girls, or should I stay with him because I had little girls? Now the girls became a big factor in that decision. But the moment he started threatening the girls, there was just no two ways about it. That was actually what fixed my decision. That's when I started seriously thinking about it. And because I started seriously thinking about it and talked about it, that I was seriously considering doing a divorce, is when he actually hit me that last time and was extremely abusive that time. And that was the last straw that broke the camel's back, literally. And the last day we were under the same roof together. So I didn't stay in the marriage because of the girls, but I definitely filed for divorce. When my parents moved here from India to help me with the girls, my dad actually asked me that question. You've given him so many chances. What if he comes back and asks you again that he's going to change like he's always said? What would you do? And at that point, I remember telling my dad, if God comes and hangs upside down and tells me this man is going to change, I know he's not going to change. So my decision is final. I'm going to file for divorce.
So, Leena, how did you tell your girls that their father had left? And how old were they when they realized the whole truth about his threats and his actions? And if I may ask, how does it impact their relationship with him now?
I don't ever remember sitting down with the girls and telling them that he has left and he was not coming back. As soon as he left, I actually called my mom and had her come here to help take care of the girls. She had already been part of their life since they were born. She had taken care of them the first 8 months, the first 2 months that we were here, and then 6 months that I had moved back to India with her. And since then, she had been back and forth helping me take care of them because I had gone back to work and he was not going to take care of them. So they were already used to having Nani in their life. And Nani moved back in and she was taking care of them. She took over that part of being their mom while I became their dad. And I went back out and found myself a job and started working again. So I never sat them down and said that he wasn't coming back, but they automatically saw that now only Nani and mom were there, and then slowly Nana moved in from India, and so it wasn't really a conscious thing that they figured out over time. I think they also figured out when Father's Day came and they were in preschool and they had to make something and they asked for their dad, and I said, why don't you make something for Mama and Nana instead? And over time they got used to making Father's Day gifts for Nana and Mama. And over the years, as they've grown up, I've told them about it. They say they remember some of it, which is strange because they were only 3 years old, but maybe they remember the stories I've told them or what happened, or they've heard other things. But I've never sat down and told them that he left. They figured it out over time. It really impacts their relationship with him in that they don't have one. When he left, they were 3 years old and he's been gone since then. He didn't want to pay child support. He didn't want to pay alimony. It was all about money for him. So when he left, he left. He never looked back. And the girls have not had him in their life. And when they turned 8 and Shirish came into their life, they have since then had a dad. So they don't even think about him. Shirish has been an amazing dad to them for the last 11 years. They've done Father's Day with him and they've done all kinds of things with him. They're really close to him. He pushes them to their boundaries. He takes them whitewater surfing. And, you know, we've done so many adventures that I know if Shirish wasn't in our life, I would not have done with the girls, because he's really been instrumental in their growth in that way. And he's their dad. So they don't have a relationship with my ex, and he's just their biological father. And I don't know if one day he'll come back and try to fix that or something. And I don't know how the girls will react. I remember when they were younger, maybe not so little, but younger. One day I asked them, and one of them had said, I'm going to kick him in his shins if he comes back. So I told her violence was not the answer, and I don't want to propagate that. But I know that I'm sure as children, they have some feelings and they will need to work that through some therapist at some point, but they don't have a relationship with him at all. And that's been his choice because he didn't want to pay for child support.
So Leena, you've mentioned 5 years later, after this entire episode with your ex-husband, you found love again with Shirish and you've become a family. And he, by your own account, is the love of your life. But finding him and his love wasn't a straight line. Can you tell us about the bumps along the way?
So when my ex left, I was actually not thinking about another relationship at all. I don't even think that thought occurred to me. My parents were there, my brother, my sister-in-law, my friends, they all stepped in and they were all helping with the girls. I was taking care of the financial responsibilities and we were having fun over the weekends. The girls and I used to do date nights. Every Friday night, the girls and I would go eat out and watch a movie or something, or I would take them to the Wiggles concert or some other concert. So we really didn't think about having another relationship. But as the girls started to get older, my friends started nudging me towards it. My brother and my sister-in-law started nudging me towards it. They started asking me to consider having somebody. Actually, it started with one of my ex's relatives who had a son who was divorced, reaching out to my parents and wanting to set that relationship up. And in fact, I did start dating that guy. And but when my ex's parents found out, they kind of threatened that family and said that if that relationship goes forward, then their son is going to come and do something to. So it got complicated. So again, that thing started and stopped, and I said, okay, I'm fine by myself. I don't need anything. And one day we were sitting in the office at lunchtime. My close friends at work, we were joking about it. And as a joke, we decided to create an online profile for me at shadi.com. And they all felt like I did need somebody. I was very young still, and they wanted me to have a person, and they wanted me to have love in their life. And the fact that the girls used to feel sad every time they made Father's Day gifts for my brother and my dad, kind of also factored into the decision that I should get them a real dad. So I started meeting with people online. I did come across all kinds of weird people, but when I read Shirish's profile, it was actually something about it that spoke to me, because he was like me, a single father. He didn't have his ex involved in the process of the day-to-day raising of his child. And his profile clearly said, being a single dad, I know what my responsibilities are and my priorities are for my kid, and I'm going to give you love and respect, but that's going to all happen if you have the patience to wait till my kid is grown up. And so that I understood what he was talking about, and that's the reason we first met. And then as I started to get to know him better, and I met his friends, and they had great things to say about him, they pretty much took responsibility for this relationship. They said, you cannot go wrong if you marry this guy. And so I saw a lot of people that respected him and that spoke well of him. And when I look back, and I can't find anybody who did that for my ex, and that's what encouraged me to start that relationship and stay in that relationship.
So Leena, from being a single woman with 2 kids, you now have a husband, a family, and 3 kids. What kind of changes did you have to make to your lifestyle to accommodate this new family?
So there were a lot of changes, and I think every change has been good for me in that I consider myself extremely lucky. You know, people look back at my life and my past and say, "Oh my God, you've gone through so much, and there's been so much." But I consider myself to be very lucky because every time there has been a change in my life, it's been for the better. So when Shirish and Ishan came into our life, at that time we decided we were going to move, and based on who was living in a better school district, we made the decision. We both had our own homes, and so we decided to move into Shirish's home. um, my career choices have always been dictated by the stage my life is in. When my girls were born, I stopped consulting and traveling. Prior to that, I used to be traveling and consulting all the time. When the girls were born, I decided to take on local projects only. Obviously, I took a pay cut to do that, and gave up a lot of different perks to do that. When my divorce happened, I actually stopped consulting altogether because it was long hours, a lot of stress. I joined Oracle full time and did a 9 to 5 job. When I got married to Sharish, I was still doing my 9 to 5 job. By that time, the girls were in elementary school. Ishan had just started middle school. And now I was going to my boss every single day and saying, "I'm sorry, I need to leave early because my girls have a dentist appointment," or "I'm leaving early because Ishan has a swim class," or "I'm leaving early because the girls have basketball practice." And I realized that wasn't going to work for too long. um, Sharish participated in all of that, but he had less flexibility with his job. So I ended up doing all of those duties. And when my business partner, when Kajal came up and said, "Let's do something together, it's going to give us more flexibility," and the opportunity to start a company, build a company, and have more flexibility in raising the children came about, I just grasped it with both hands. And so that was a huge career decision because I gave up my income and job that I had been doing for the last 6 years to start this company. But it's really worked out, and I managed to spend time with the kids and take them to every single one of their games. I showed up for every single game, and having that flexibility of running my own company allowed me to do that.
So, Leena, you have a staffing company for high tech and engineering personnel in Mumba Technologies. And you also use these resources to help other victims of domestic abuse and marital discord. Do you draw on your experiences, your own experiences, to counsel them as you help these women?
I try to do that as much as I can. I don't have a formal program put together. I know there are other companies that have formal programs to do that. But being a small company, we didn't actually get together and put a program together. 5 years into the company, my business partner decided she had had enough of staffing because she had done staffing for 20 years prior to starting this company. So she left and started a different venture with her husband in a completely different space. So again, it took me a little bit of time to get things settled and get the company back on track once she left. After that, I realized that I had the flexibility to be able to bring women in and do training and guidance and advice and connect them to resources so they could go back to work. Some of these women had taken a break in their career because they had moved or relocated for their husbands' jobs, or some of them had had children and never gone back to work. As I started working with them, I started having more women come to me because they were looking for a job, either because they thought the job will help them fix their relationships, or because they needed to have a job because they were thinking of ending their existing relationship. So for those women, I started helping them with counseling based on my own experience. So as far as helping them find a job, that was the part that I did with Mumba. We trained them, we connected them to resources and found them other jobs. But there was the counseling part where if somebody came to me and said, "I need to find a job because my husband is abusing me, and it's going to stop because I'm as soon as I start earning, he's going to become a better person." That's when I gave them my story. And that's actually why I'm doing this program here with you today, because I really want women to understand that it's not their job, it's not their responsibility to fix the relationship or the man that they're in the relationship with. It's either going to be fixed by counseling for both of them, or it's going to be fixed because something other than them fixing it is going to change it. So I definitely want them to find a job and be financially independent, but because they need to be responsible for their own life, not because it's going to change their husband's behavior towards them. I really think that all women need to be out there and need to have a job, because it's also going to give them that confidence that they can face anything, and that they don't have to stay in abusive relationships. They don't have to put up with things that they don't want to, and they don't have to believe when somebody tells them that they're not worth it and that they're not capable of doing something. You know, we're all capable of a lot, and if finding a job and doing a job and bringing home a paycheck makes you believe that, then go for it, get a job. But if that's the only thing that's going to save your relationship, then first work on that relationship, or walk out and get a job.
Leena, you and Shirish are the quintessential modern family. He has a son from his previous marriage. You have two daughters. And if one sees all of you interact, they would not know that it is a blended family. How have both of you managed this confluence? How was it in the early days, and how has it evolved to now?
I think that's a really good point, because a lot of people have come up to us, and these are people that have known us over the years, in the last few years, and they've been surprised by the fact that Ishan is from Shirish's previous marriage, or the girls are from my previous marriage. They did not know that because they've never heard the word step in our household. And this was something that we didn't sit down and decide. This was just something automatically happened. When Shirish and I got married, we were mom, dad, older brother, and two sisters. And there was no other outside influences. None of our exes were involved in that process. They're not around day to day to confuse the issue. The girls only have one dad, so he's dad. There's no step. Ishan has a really good relationship with his mom. He does go and visit her, but he's very good about keeping that as, you know, you're my mom, she's my mom, and we're both okay with that. In fact, when we moved into the house, Ishan had a big bedroom, but since the girls were going to be sharing a room, he gave up his room for the girls to share, and he moved into a smaller bedroom. I think he was raised right, and he's always taken the girls and been protective about them, and they're always, when they came into Ishan's life, they were just 8 years old, so they suddenly had this bada bhaiya, and they would follow him around like Ishan bhaiya, Ishan bhaiya. And even when they were in high school, they would always proudly introduce him as the big brother to their friends. And in a lot of ways, I'm still the one who makes the important decisions for the girls, and Shirish still makes the important decisions for Ishan. But I think that happens in any family, blended or not. There's, you know, parents who make certain kinds of decisions. Shirish makes the decisions related to career and all of that because he has more influence or insight into that. And I have my input into those as well. But I'm the one who was going to be taking them to different activities. And so I was the one who decided where I enrolled the kids. And if one wanted to do dance, they all had to do dance. If one wanted to do swimming, they all had to, because it had to be easy for me to drop and pick up these kids. And so it very quickly became a family that didn't have any, you know, we've had our differences where normal families would have parenting differences. You know, if you see parents who've been married for a long time and it's their own children and they can't agree on parenting at times, so we can't agree on parenting at times. It's very normal. It has nothing to do with the fact that these are not biological children or stepchildren or any of that. And I think the very basis of that is the fact that all three kids strongly believe that we both love them equally. I love Ishan as much as I love the twins, and Shirish loves the girls as much as he loves Ishan. we treat them a little differently based on who's older, who's younger, who's a boy, who's girls. And that has its own issues in our household, like every other household. But it's not because we're a blended family.
You've had such a full life, Leena. You've seen so many highs and lows in your personal life. Professionally, you've had, like I mentioned earlier, 6 careers. If you had to pick just one or two of the most fun moments of your life for a highlight reel, which ones would you choose?
I agree with you. I think I've had a very full life, one way or the other. Despite the ups and downs that I've been through in my first marriage, despite the anxiety and anguish that I've gone through with that, I consider myself very lucky. I've always managed to come out of it, and I've managed to thrive despite the adversities. And I always thank God for that, and I thank the people around me who've always been there for me. If you ask me to pick the highlights of my life, I think one of them is definitely my 40th birthday party, and the next one is my 50th birthday party. And with everything that's happened in my life, why I picked those moments is when I was turning 40, I was single. Shirish and I were dating, but there was nothing serious about it. There was no proposal. There was no talks of what comes next. So my friends were talking about doing something for my 40th, and I decided, you know what? I've had enough in my life. I'm in control of my life. I'm going to throw myself the biggest birthday party that I've ever had. And I was in a great shape. So I bought myself the skimpiest low-cut gown and threw myself a big birthday bash with 150 of my closest friends, with an open bar and a live DJ and everything. And what I was trying to prove to myself, and what I want others to take out of it, is that you don't need to have somebody in your life. You don't need to have everything going right. You just need to be able to celebrate your milestones and your moments the way you want to, because that's something you can control. And then when I go fast forward to 10 years later, because right after my 40th birthday, Shirish proposed and we got married, and coming up to 50th birthday, he asked me what I wanted to do for my birthday. And I said, my 40th, I had to arrange myself. I want you to give me a big 50th birthday party. And he definitely did. He just told me to get out of the way, and he took over, and he had this big bash with live band and videos and all kinds of things. He's really set a very high bar for the rest of our friends to follow. But I think of those two as celebrations of everything that you have gone through. Your milestones are determined by your years, but they really do account for the miles that you have put on yourselves and the things that you have gone through. So when you get to those milestones or any other occasions that you can celebrate, go big, because you're definitely worth it, and you should definitely celebrate yourself.
That's such a lovely thought, Leena. Here's raising a toast that the best is yet to come, and it lies in the days ahead for all of us. I wish you and all you care for the very best. It has been so enlightening, and what a joy to talk with you today. Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you so much, Madhuri.